October 1, 2013 is the 10th anniversary of an organization called the Ranchland Trust of Kansas, also known as RTK. This organization was created by leaders of the Kansas Livestock Association who had did quite a bit of research to look at the future demands for an agricultural land trust in this state. So consequently, these individuals, with the blessing of the Kansas Livestock Association Board, started this entity, and early in its meetings and planning discussions, created a mission statement, which is to preserve the Kansas ranching heritage and open spaces through the voluntary preservation of working landscapes. This was done, and of course, to think about future generations of folks who will be the future farmers and ranchers in this state. During that initial planning session, they identified several visions or assumptions to help guide the early stages of the organization. One of those was that agricultural land would continue to come under pressure for development, and that is clearly the case in the last 10 years with increased growth of suburban areas both in the greater Wichita area and Johnson County. Also, much more demand for access to land for energy development and other types of industrial development. Secondly, the assumption would be that farmers and ranchers would look towards an ag land trust, particularly one supported by the Kansas Livestock Association, that would help them conserve their family legacy and conserve their land for the future. And we've seen considerable demand and have quite a list of landowners that are ready and willing to do work with us, provided we can find future resources. I think another indicator of the demand for the perpetual conservation easements is a relatively new USDA conservation easement program called the Grassland Reserve Program. And it even started after the creation of Ranchland Trust. And to date, there's over 60 of those contracts across the state, mostly in the grassland areas on over 36,000 acres. And there again is a long list of people that are interested in doing that. The third vision was that we would receive public support both from landowners and the general public who supported our mission to help our operational costs. That has occurred and has enabled us to hire staff and to do the outreach efforts and governance that's necessary. Also, during those early planning stages 10 years ago, the group of producers and charter board members identified some values and things that they wanted to guide the organization. One key value was that the organization would collaborate and cooperate with other organizations to have a greater impact. And that collaboration has only flourished in the last 10 years. The organization has worked with the likes of Kansas Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy on lots of outreach to landowners, and worked with both state and federal lawmakers on laws that make our job easier. Another example of this collaboration was that the Ranchland Trust of Kansas was one of the charter members of a group called the Partnership of Rangeland Trusts. And that is essentially 7 ag land trusts, all affiliated with state cattlemen's organizations who work together to help address the challenges that we face. And I might add that that organization as a whole has about 1,200 conservation easements on over 2 million acres. Another example of collaboration would be working with the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national group of land trust, the Partnership of Rangeland Trusts, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and others on favorable farm bill policies that eventually help in the acquisition and purchase of conservation easements, all which help those landowners who voluntarily step forward to do this procedure. Another value is that the organization would strive for organizational excellence. 2 examples come to mind of addressing that value. One is that the organization has a healthy stewardship account in place that's not used for operational costs and is there to help administer and, if necessary, defend conservation easements. And it's a fund that is probably considerably higher than most land trusts given the number of easements and acres that's administered by the organization. Some of the projects that come to mind that have developed in the last 10 years and more recently is the Brand Legacy Program. The organization's board determined that that would be a way to forever archive the history and the legacy of Kansas farm and ranch families. Secondly, is the organization has worked with the national group Land Trust Alliance on an organizational assessment and has identified procedures that we should take in the next few years to enhance our ability to have strong and ethical governance. The most important aspect, though, is the conservation, and that's the main purpose of the organization. And we were thankful to Jim and Kathy Hoy, who in 2007 granted us the first conservation easement, which was a donated easement that they felt strongly about for protecting their lands for their future generations. And the other conservation project that we're proud of is through the efforts of the Nature Conservancy and EDP Renewables North America on a project to voluntarily mitigate for the acquisition of approximately 12,000 acres. We have targeted that program in the heart of the Smoky Hills in central Kansas, and to date have worked with 7 families to permanently conserve about 6,000 acres, and several landowners on the list to do even more conservation in that area in the next few years. I would say that the future of the organization and the amount of conservation work that we can do will depend, one, on the continued support that we receive from our friends and donors. But secondly, most importantly, is the identification and finding those resources that we can use to work with landowners who are interested in selling the conservation easements. I would encourage you to look more into the organization by going to www.ranchlandtrustofkansas.org. And just want to conclude by thanking the board members through the years who have set a solid foundation, and also thank the general public for their continued support.